The Raiders don't have their head coaching position taken care of last week, and there were many different reports that were intensifying the connection between Ben Johnson and the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, it didn't happen. Tom Brady heavily involved in the search. And I looked at the names yesterday. We have a tracker at PFT with all the vacancies, all the interviews, all the requests that have been made, everything. Here's the list for the Raiders. Once I scroll down here and find the head coach and general manager tracker, we've got all of them there. And I'm scrolling again. Here's everyone the Raiders have talked to other than Ben Johnson. Aaron Glenn, the Lions defensive coordinator, we'll talk about him later because that may be the next domino to fall. Todd Monken, the Ravens offensive coordinator. Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator. Robert Saleh, who's getting a second interview later this week with the Jaguars. He's the former head coach of the Jets. And Pete Carroll, also Vance Joseph, the Broncos defensive coordinator. And Carroll is the one that stands out. Carroll is the most accomplished of all of them. Only Saleh and Joseph have been head coaches before. They both were fired in their first stints. Carroll has taken a couple of teams to a Super Bowl, the 2013 and 2014 Seahawks, won the 2013 Super Bowl 48, lost to Tom Brady and the Patriots in Super Bowl 49 on a fateful call to pass the ball instead of run it that Devin McCourty is well familiar with. I guess, you could say that Pete Carroll gave Tom a Super Bowl ring, so the least Tom Brady can do is give Pete Carroll a job.
Some might say.
Many are saying. But I was told yesterday, don't overlook Pete Carroll. And when you look at the other guys that they've spoken to so far, of all of them, I'm hiring Pete Carroll. And I don't care that he's 73. As I pointed out earlier today, he's still a decade younger than Wayne Newton. So Las Vegas is the perfect town for him.
It's so interesting because this is something we talked about weeks ago of, all these teams are moving on, but who are the candidates? Who are the guys that teams are really trying to get? And now we're starting to see the dominoes fall. We saw Mike Vrabel go to New England. Now Ben Johnson in Chicago. Who are the next names that are like these gotta-have-it guys from the coaching realm of, we got to get them? And, I think of the only other, younger coach is Liam Cohen, who's coming up. But I think there's a little bit of, is this the guy? Is this it's 1 year with Baker? And that's the question mark. So now you look and okay, if Aaron Glenn isn't coming because his name seems to be linked more to the Saints and the Jets, and you look at the rest of the group, it's like, well, we know what we're going to get in Pete Carroll. That's the thing, I think, for these franchises of there's a little bit of an unknown. So if you're going to go with the unknown, you want the guy that you bring in to kind of be like this whiz kid of at least we know he has mastered offense or defense or something. But if not, let's get the guy in that knows ball, that knows how to turn a franchise around, because we see when they just hired Antonio Pierce and he was a guy that came in as an interim. They won some games, great energy about him, younger guy, seemed to relate really well with the players, and they gave him a season to prove it. So if you're not going to give a lot of time to try to turn something around, you better go get a guy who has turned things around, who has been a college coach. He's been in New England as a head coach, went to Seattle when Seattle ended up drafting a lot of great players that turned that whole franchise around, and he led it. So I think it would be a good decision for the Raiders. I will say it surprises me as Pete Carroll's name gets in. When he left Seattle, at first it was he was going from the sideline coaching into the front office. Then it was determined that, no, he still wants to coach, so he won't be back in Seattle. And I think about Bill Belichick when he was let go in New England. The thought process was, well, somebody's going to pick him up right away. And he went and he met with Atlanta. Nothing ended up happening. And then it was like, well, he'll definitely be back in at the next end of the coaching cycle this year. And now he's in North Carolina coaching the Tar Heels. And Pete Carroll looks to possibly be the favorite to go for the Raiders or whatever. His name's coming up a lot more. It's surprising to me a little bit because when Pete Carroll was let go, I think everyone kind of assumed like he was going to retire, and Bill, no one assumed that really. And now you look up and yeah, Bill's still coaching, but his name is not really discussed at all in any of these job openings, even though we're saying there's a limited amount of candidates. It's just very surprising to me that his name isn't coming up. And I know it was mentioned a little bit because of it, but I feel like that's only because of the buyout terms, not because we're hearing his name linked to teams.
Well, and we did hear the linkage a couple of weeks ago between Belichick and Brady.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, there's always stuff going on behind the curtain. And in that specific case, I think what was going on behind the curtain was Belichick asked for a favor and Tom gave him one and put his name out there. Just one last attempt to pull the ripcord on a lawnmower that just won't start. And it may never start again, Bill Belichick in the NFL. And that's where it's got to gall Bill at a certain level that Tom didn't make a big push for him and might instead pivot to Pete Carroll. I'm not saying he's going to. All I was told by someone I trust, don't overlook Pete Carroll to the Raiders. And when you look at the current roster of guys they're considering, it wouldn't be a surprise. I frankly would lean toward Pete Carroll, especially where that team is right now. Somebody to come in with that experience, with that knowledge, with that resume of significant accomplishment, and just kind of reset and maybe get somebody on the staff that could be groomed to take over for him after 4 or 5 years or however long he stays. I don't know. He's got this weird superpower, Devin. When he's away from the field, he looks every bit 73 and then some. The moment that he steps foot on the field, he's jumping around, he's throwing passes, he's got the gloves on, he's chewing the gum. He's like a completely different human being when he gets onto a football field. It's like the fountain of youth for him is in those little black carcinogenic pellets on the field turf. So I don't know, maybe like other things that are carcinogenic, they also have their benefits. But I digress. I wouldn't be surprised. There's a lot of arguments you could make for Pete Carroll. And the other side of it for the Raiders, where would they go? You mentioned Liam Cohen, 1-year experience as an offensive coordinator. And if I'm going to hire a coach, no disrespect intended to Liam Cohen, because everybody's got to be a head coach for the first time. But if I'm going to hire a head coach, I want a proven commodity. I want someone who's been there, who's done it, and who I have confidence that I'm not rolling the dice like I am with a first-round draft pick, where it's a lottery ticket. And you just got to hope that guy you've made the investment in is going to be able to do the next job. I want a guy that's already proven he can do the next job. And obviously Pete Carroll has proven that.
Yeah, and you said it. I never knew how old Pete Carroll was. And I remember the first time, because him and Bill were two of the older coaches in the NFL, and they mentioned Pete Carroll. I was like, Pete Carroll's in his 70s? Like, you just had no idea, because you think back to his days at USC. Like, you name the California, rather, rapper, entertainer, they were at USC's practices. They were always there. And then when he got to Seattle, it was the same thing. It was Snoop coming there. It was all of these different people always. And, like, Pete Carroll just seemed like this youthful guy. And I think that's something that we got to kind of maybe get away from, that. Like, if a coach is older, he can't relate, or he can't coach a group of men in the NFL anymore because he's just too old. Like, there's no thought process. Like, even though you might believe in that concept, but I think each individual is different. And if you get around Pete Carroll and you like him around the players, and I think Pete Carroll, very similar to Bill Belichick, his son was at the University of Washington as well as the offensive coordinator. He spent some time in Washington around college athletes, around the team, that I think it's enabled him and Bill to have this feeling of, hey, maybe we did have to reset a little bit, get back around some of these young players, see how they operate, what they need. And I think that'll help him too if he does get hired in the NFL again, because we all keep talking about how the players are different. And I think going back to college, being around them, doing those different things, I think will help. But again, I agree with you. I don't know if this is a good thing for the Raiders, that as you look around, you don't have maybe the guy that you definitely wanted. But I think if you have to say, hey, we're going to settle for this coach, like, why wouldn't you want Pete Carroll? He's won a Super Bowl. He's been to the Super Bowl multiple times, even fallen short a couple times. But to have that in your building, I want to think about what the players will learn, and then eventually the staff he hires, the connections he'll have to hire a staff, and what they'll be able to take from him going forward, like you said, if it is indeed grooming the next head coach to take over and be your head coach of the future.
Tough spot with the Raiders. You're in a division with 3 playoff teams from this year. You're going to be dealing with Patrick Mahomes indefinitely. You got Jim Harbaugh back in the NFL now and Justin Herbert paired together. And you have Bo Nix and Sean Payton. And who is your quarterback going to be if you're the Las Vegas Raiders? It is a tough, tough spot, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if Pete Carroll ends up being the coach. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.